Welcome, everybody, to another Outscaper Podcast. Today, I have my guest, Kelly Mathison, with Elevation Advisor, and your hardscape company is?
Legacy Landscapes out of Spokane.
Legacy Landscapes in Washington. Yep, awesome.
Yep.
So, Kelly, I really appreciate you hopping on. We connected about a year ago, I think. We've been following each other, and you reached out to me to show me something that you were working on, and it was pretty cool. And we'll get to that. But let's start with just introducing yourself. When did you get into the hardscape industry? And we'll just start there.
Well, so I started mowing lawns in the third grade, like most of us, right? Because remember I wanted to drive so bad. Even in the third grade, my mom said, well, if you're ever going to drive, you're going to buy your own car. And man, I went door to door literally in the third grade. I remember one of my clients that I wanted so bad. She said, I can't hire you. You're too small. So I waited till the next year, and she ended up hiring me the next year. But so I started, just mowing lawns, and I did it all the way through high school. And I liked the freedom that it gave me. I typically made more money than my friends. They were tied up working at, the fast food places on the weekends, on Friday nights. And I didn't have to do that. I could wake up on a Saturday morning, mow a few lawns, and I had enough money to do what I wanted to do. And then I when I got out of high school, I was kind of lost. I didn't know where to go, what to do. My dad told me that there was a landscape and horticulture program at the community college in Spokane. And so I moved. I grew up in a place called Tri-Cities. So I moved from there to Spokane. I went to the 2-year program, which did not help one bit with being successful in the landscaping business, right? But I met my first partner there, and he's kind of taught me how to landscape. He transitioned me from lawn mowing into landscaping. And, for the next 2 years, we were mowing 3 days a week, landscaping 2, and we hated the mowing. So we sold that off and got straight into landscaping, and we just started going from there, That's kind of that's how I got into it.
Right. So you guys created a partnership when you were in school there?
Yeah, we created a partnership.
How did that work out?
Didn't last very long. So, we made all the same mistakes that everybody else makes, right? I remember I said, well, how do we know how much to charge? He goes, well, we just charge the going rate. And so, I remember way back then, it was like $500 a valve, right? That's how much we charge for sprinklers. And, we didn't know if we were going to make money on it. That's just what you had to charge. I remember after we got rid of the lawn care, we did the landscaping for about a couple more years, and we ended up getting a really big residential renovation, high profile project. And the client had us do about $20,000 to $30,000 in change orders, which we didn't get signed. We were stupid. And when we got to the end of the project, he was like, oh no, I thought that was all included. So, that was it. And we ended up having to go get a $20,000 loan just to get through the winter. And we didn't really like each other anymore. And he kind of was tired of being a business owner, and we both got married. And so, we had families now, and he just said, look, why don't we just split the debt halfway in the middle, and I'll pay off half and you pay off half. And I was like, well, I'll do you one better. Cause here's the thing, man, I love the landscaping industry, and I really liked our name. This probably wasn't the most educated decision I ever made in my life, but I didn't want to quit. I wanted to see this through. And so I told him if he walked away, I would take all the debt if I could keep the business, the name, and the equipment. And I don't think he could have walked away fast enough. And so he took off. Wow. And then I kind of started there on my own.
Okay. And about what year was that?
That was about 2000.
2000. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I remember the last time we talked, about a year ago when we first talked, we were talking about, I think, the 2008-ish time. And you were saying you were doing a lot of door knocking then again. And we just learned that you started doing that when you were a kid. But in 2008, tell us a little bit about kind of what was happening then with the business. And then, kind of leading up to the story you were telling me where you went door knocking and really generated, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the middle of the recession.
Yeah. So I spent from 2000 to 2007 proving that I didn't know what I was doing. The thing though is I feel like I was the same as every other landscape I can't say every, right? But the majority of these guys, right? From who I talked to, I was really good at what I did. I just couldn't figure the business side of it out. And so we racked up 20 grand in debt, right? In 2000. And then over the next 7 years, I racked up an additional $130,000 in debt, secured debt. So I got to the end of 2007. My wife was pregnant with our second child. She was on bed rest for 7 out of the 9 months. So a lot of the debt was basically from that. I just couldn't pay the hospital bills. But there was a company where we lived here in Spokane, and they were like the biggest, baddest company you could ever, they were it, right? If anybody famous came to town, these were the guys that they hired, and they were amazing at design and what I thought at the construction side. Well, I was so good that they started giving me all their overflow work, and that was in 2006 and 7. But I still couldn't figure out how to make money. So by the end of 7, they made me an offer to come work for them that I couldn't refuse. And so in 2008, yes, I went to work for this company, shut mine down I really didn't know how I was going to pay all this debt off, but I didn't want to file bankruptcy. Right. And so I went to work for them, and the deal was they had to hire my crews, which they were happy to do because they were amazing. So I worked for them. But when I got into their business and into their company, I realized that they had the same problems that I did. So they were the same train wreck, just waiting for the bridge to go out, right? They didn't know what their overhead was. They didn't know how to figure out how to charge. I mean, this was back then, right? This was a $5 million company, had no idea how to charge. And literally when I came in there, he said, Kelly, I'm going to tell you something. I feel like the front door of this business where the money's coming in is this big. And I got this big gaping wall in the back where the money's just going out. And he's like, I need you to help me figure out where all this money's going. And so we spent that year just trying to, and I figured a lot of it out, right? Problem was at the end of that year, we had the 2008 crash.
Yeah.
And he freaked out like everybody else freaked out. And they basically, where we live in Spokane, it's, we get winters. We only work 9 months. We can't work during the wintertime. So he came up with this idea to go to Seattle, right? And this is where it gets kind of weird and fun and cool. But he came up with this idea to go to Seattle because you could work pretty much 12 months out of the year there. And so he sent me over there to go knock on doors to get them business, which give me a break, man. I knocked on doors in the 3rd grade. I sold candy bars and lawn mowing, right? I mean, anyway, so I'm literally driving to Seattle with my wife on the phone, and she's Googling how to do door-to-door sales. And she's teaching me how to do door-to-door sales as I'm driving over to Seattle. And it took me probably 4 to 6 weeks to kind of figure out like what to say, how to say it, what neighborhoods to go into. But I started to really get it. I started to get it figured out. The problem was this company internally, honestly, it was like tooth decay, right? They just weren't nice. They weren't nice people to be around. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I told my wife, I was like, I can't sell for a company I don't believe in. And so her and I decided that I should give the landscaping industry one more chance. I'd already failed twice, right? So go ahead and give it one more shot. But the cool thing, Nick, was all these prior years, if the phone didn't ring, I didn't know what to do to get it to ring. We were in the phone book back then. Remember that day, those days?
Yeah, things were different.
We were in the phone book. There wasn't much more you could do, or I didn't know of, to just market yourself. But now that I knew how to knock on doors, I was like, look, if I can go to Seattle and promote a company that doesn't even like exist there, really, I can do it here. And so that was it. And so in 2009, I started my landscaping company back up with $150,000 in unsecured debt, 1 truck, a skid steer that I didn't even have a trailer to pull it on, and 1 employee that actually wanted to leave that other place and came back. My old crew didn't even want to come back. That's what we started with. And I told the 1 employee, I said, I'll sell the work. You do the work. If I have to pick a shovel up, man, we're in trouble. So he did the work and I sold it and I kept selling. And, in 2008, I was just talking to a guy on the phone about this just about an hour before you and I were on the phone. I had one goal in 2009, and we figured out what my overhead was. And we knew that I needed 30 grand saved up by December to make it through the winter, so that I didn't have to worry and go try to find odd jobs during the wintertime. So that was literally my one goal. Now, trying to get there was a whole nother story. So to answer your question, knocking on doors, for the next 4 years, I knocked on 7,000 to 10,000 doors, and it blew me away because I was selling $100,000 landscapes literally from the doorstep. So when everybody else was freaking out and their marketing wasn't working and companies were like shrinking and downsizing, I was actually building my company up, hiring guys, buying equipment during one of the greatest economic downturns we've seen, literally since the Great Depression. And I did it all knocking on doors.
That's so amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And the fact that you had like, guys are listening to this going, I would never do that, but you were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like you just kind of had to, and you were willing to. And I think, that's what a lot of people need to have, is that willingness to do whatever it's going to take to reach their goals, whatever it is, to have 30K in the bank at the end of the year, get out of debt. Was that debt that you had, was that the leftover debt, or did you go into debt, more debt to start the new business?
No, that was just the leftover debt that I didn't pay off. My creditors were calling me all the time. And I finally told them all, I said, look, you have two choices. I can file bankruptcy and you'll get nothing, or you can be patient while I try to get my life figured out. Yeah. It kind of blew me away that all of my creditors basically were like, they had two choices, right? They can be hard on me and I was just going to have to file, but I flat out told them I don't want to do that. Everyone in my family has filed bankruptcy and I didn't want to. And so that was important to me. Yeah. And so every one of them was actually just patient and said, okay, we'll wait. And it took me probably 5 years. And I ended up getting it all paid off.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, obviously the great thing is you probably didn't take on more in the 5 years, more than you had to with maybe getting a piece of equipment or whatever.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I didn't go into any more debt, and I was actually paying for all of my equipment and my trucks cash.
Go good.
Which is awesome. Right. But then I didn't have any cash. Like I was cash poor. Yeah. And my banker took me to lunch one day. And she actually brought me into the bank to teach sales training. Okay. But during that conversation, she said, Kelly, you don't have to pay cash for your equipment. It makes you cash poor, which I was already experiencing that. And she said, as long as you have the cash in the bank, the debt is actually good. So actually, after talking to her, I was like, God, that would help me out a lot. So from that day forward, what I would typically do is I would pay like 25% or up to 50% down in cash. And then I would finance for 3 years. And so that's just how I buy equipment anymore. I actually I'll put some money down and then I just make sure that I pay it off in 3 years. And for me, that's just been great. It's been really good for cash flow.
Trucks as well. Trucks, machines, all that. Yep. Yeah, that's a whole conversation that everyone talks about. Do I finance? Do I not? Do I pay cash? There's so many guys on Instagram saying you got to pay cash, and there's just as many saying no, finance it. Why get rid of all your cash,
Right.
And I think whichever you're comfortable with. And at the end of the day, as long as you're making money, and you're not putting yourself in a tight spot.
I think that's the number one question right there. Right. Yeah. It's like, you got to make money. And
you can take on debt as long as you're responsible, financially responsible with it, right? Don't take on the $100,000 unsecured line of credit to put yourself through the winter, and then you don't fix it that next summer, and then you have to do it again next winter. That should be your sign, like something's wrong here. I need to take a peek at, how I'm pricing stuff.
And I'm like the walking proof of what not to do, right? I spent 7 years saying to my wife, okay, next year it'll be different, and she probably was smart enough back then to be like, she used to be, what's going to be different? I don't know, but it'll be different. She didn't have a choice. And so, man, I was an idiot. Like
the next job, I'm going to sign the next big job and I'm going to get a bunch of profit and I'm going to pay off the debt from that job. And then you undercoded the job, or the job goes south, and now you lost money on the job.
But, and I think one of the things for guys in this industry that's difficult is, or at least it was for me, you do these big jobs, right? Like, even back then I was doing $30,000 to $100,000 projects, and that's a lot of money, especially to a kid that grew up with no money, right? Like you're just like, oh my God, we're doing this $100,000 project. And, whatever, if you're using a spreadsheet or whatever, you can look at what your material cost is. And it's like, you got this big old pool of money that there's no way I'm not going to make money. And it's just it was so bewildering to me back then that when you get to the end of a job and it's like, where the heck did the money go? Or you do, or I remember back in those days, I remember thinking there's all this money left over. And then my bookkeeper would say, well, you have to pay, your payroll taxes and your sales tax. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I don't have any money left.
Yeah. It's so hard to look at your bank account and go, well, look at all that money. I'm doing pretty well, and then you go spend it on something, and all of a sudden at the end of the year, there's nothing.
Yeah. Sucks.
And you're looking at your P&L going, oh, well, I mean, we were kind of profitable, but why is my bank account negative?
That's one of the worst positions to be in. I remember that happened to me in like 2011 or 12. My accountant came to me and said I owed I think back then it was like 15 to 18,000 bucks. I was like, I don't have it.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you made money. Like, you don't have a pool of cash sitting around. I'm like, no. And I think that's when one of the times it kind of really hit me, like, I got to start paying cash for all this stuff. Right. Cause like all my cash is gone. And so it was, that's the worst, is to be profitable and not being able to pay your taxes. Do you know what I did though? In 2009, I actually got smart. My bookkeeper told me, he's like, dude, you don't need to do that. Now, and I said, I need to do it for me. So what I did when I started my business back up in 2009, I opened up 3 bank accounts. And the first one was for taxes. Okay. The second one was for savings. And the third one was what we called my general account. And we knew any money that was in the general account, Kelly could use. Right. And so every dollar that went into that account, we took out what we needed to for payroll taxes and sales tax. And then he would also extract a little bit of money to go into the savings account. And that's the money that was going to take us through the winter. And so the only thing I had to look at was what's my AP, right? And what's, my accounts payable. And then what have we ordered that's not in? And so that was a huge mindset shift for me, is being able to look in that account and not have to worry about how much of that went to taxes or whatever. It was just, it was Kelly's money, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a profit first kind of structure. The profit first for contractors. I have it somewhere. I don't have it reading me. I can't remember the author of it, but there's the Profit First book. And then there's the Profit First for Contractors, where he really takes the Profit First fundamentals and kind of puts it into more contractor speak and how we could do that. Pretty much the same kind of thing, having your separate accounts. When you get paid, this money goes here, this money goes there. Obviously your materials get paid, all your accounts payable gets paid first, and then what's left over gets divvied up. And you pay yourself your profit first, because that's why we went into business, is to make we're a for-profit company. And so so it's kind of an exercise of you got to pay yourself. And I know so many people that don't do this. You got to pay yourself first, and then you have to be able to run your business with what's left over. But so many guys go, well, I can barely cover what I have now and barely pay myself. It's like, well, then that's your sign that something's really wrong here. Like, you need to take control of your expenses, or you're not charging enough, all those things. And so it's a huge conversation, and it's one that we've talked about a lot. And so 2009, cool. You did that. What was some of the, what was the big thing that really kind of got you to where you were finally able to put that money away and kind of have money at the end of the year? Like, what you talked about, your mindset shift. I mean, obviously it's that, but then what kind of tools and things did you start to put in place to make sure that happens? Whether your pricing structures, how you budgeted for stuff, things like that.
So in 2009, I went to a friend of mine, and this guy he worked for a Fortune 10 company, and he worked directly under the board of directors. So he was really high up, right? He is the complete opposite of me. Like, I'm all extrovert, contractor, work outside in the dirt. This guy literally lives in his basement. He's on his computer, and that's what he prefers to live, right? And so people are like, how in the world did you guys meet? And I was like, well, it's pretty simple. I married his hot sister. I mean, literally, that's how we met. We would have never in a million years crossed paths, but I went to him down in his basement, and it was right when I started. And I said, man, I'm going to give the landscaping a gig one more try. And I was like, look, I am really good at what I do, but I'm terrible at the business side of things. Now, he was a data scientist. So his whole job was just taking data and putting it together in ways that could be interpreted, and then coming up with systems for this company that helped them make money, right? So he was just really a numbers guy and a systems guy. And so I went to him and I was like, so I need your help. I can pay you $0, take it or leave it. And he chuckled and said, I'll take it. And so we spent the next 10 years really figuring this beast of an industry out, right? Like, when he first started with me and I started back up in 2009, we're using what's known as the markup system, where it's actually known as MORS, which is where you mark up, multiple overhead recoveries. So you're marking up your materials, you mark up your labor, you mark up your equipment. And, then the hope is with some calculations, you'll recover your overhead and make a profit. And we were using that system, and that system was really frustrating because it had a flaw in it. And the flaw, I think you talked about in my webinars, the flaw is that there's an unequal relationship between labor and materials in virtually every aspect of the landscaping, right? So like what I mean by that is, when you do irrigation, you have a low material cost, but a high labor cost, and it takes longer to put in than say when we do boulders, right? So like boulders they're actually a higher cost, but only takes like a day to put in. And so when you're using the markup system, there isn't really a predictable way to know how much money you're going to make either every day or at the end of the year, because it depends on what you're installing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we knew that was an issue, but it really didn't matter because I was really good at sales. So you asked what kind of tools that I started to use. So my now business partner, my brother-in-law, Greg, he started going to work to just put all these spreadsheets together. And he basically sat me down one day and he said, I'm going to ask you some questions and I'm going to basically put your brain into a spreadsheet. And he would look at me and he goes, how do you figure out, like, how do you bid for a paver patio? Right. And so I just literally started just telling him, I length by width by this, and how to figure out my gravel. And it was so funny because he was just typing, just type. And all of a sudden I would get done talking. I look at the computer screen and there's this really long formula, right? In Excel, like this, just like, it's like a book. Mm-hmm. But what was cool is he had programmed it to the point where all I had to do was put the length and the width of the paver patio. And then the formulas that he built automatically figured out all my materials and my labor. So basically what he built me, it used to take me 4 to 8 hours sometimes to do, $100,000, $200,000 bid. And all of a sudden when he finished this spreadsheet, like I was doing bids in 2 hours, and then he figured out a way to automate the proposals so that once I did a bid, the proposal was automatically created in a really professional manner. And so now all of a sudden my bidding time went down to like, sometimes a half an hour to an hour. And so that was really cool. But the other thing that I did, Nick, and it sounds like you do it, I started reading every day, right? And I read every book. I say I read every book I could get my hands on, but really what I did is I read every book I could get my hands on by Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy. Okay. About sales, mindset, and just how to run a business. And so I was doing the work mentally, and my brother-in-law was helping me build out all these systems. And what really struck me is, in this industry, we have a hard time keeping guys, right? And I've had the same guys since before I went to work for the other companies. One of my guys, the guy that runs my company, my operations manager, he's been with me for over 25 years. And then one of my project managers has been with me for 20, another for 15, and another for 10. And a lot of guys are asking me like, why does everybody stay? Yeah. And I can tell you why. The reason why is because when I was reading all these books, I was writing my goals down. My guys knew some of my business goals, right? And I firmly believe that when your employees can see that you have a vision and you're going somewhere, it settles them down and they want to be a part of it. And so I was able to keep the same guys on my crews. And then we just started designing cooler and more intricate and bigger jobs. And these guys were with us long enough and we got sick of subs. And so we've just got this amazing crew that literally we don't sub anything out. We do our own concrete countertops, irrigation, pavers. We do our own decks, pavilions, pergolas, you name it. My guys build it. And it's crazy. It's pretty cool. That's awesome. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of went off on a tangent.
No, it's great. Yeah, I think, there's a couple things that we could touch on, but yeah, I think what you said there, one of the keys to your success where you're at now, having all these guys for 20 years, I think any business, any owner that I've talked to, in a similar situation has all said that I put one of my priorities was my mindset, my leadership training, and my sales training. Like those are kind of like the three pieces that are pretty much true with every successful person that I've ever talked to. And it's really been the thing, that's helping me as well grow. And it's just, I tell people like entrepreneurship, leadership, personal development has just been huge for me as a person, as a husband, as a dad, as a friend, and as a business owner. It's just, and a boss. It's really been the key to a lot of the growth that I've experienced, and obviously you as well. And I think, a lot of people need to hear that. And it's a lot of work. Like, it's not just like, it's kind of work. You have to be intentional with that. And I think a lot of guys got to look in the mirror and say, ask themselves you find that to get to the point where it's like, you see where you're at, it's not where you want to be. And you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, am I the person that I need to be to get to where I want to go? Right. And oftentimes that's the question you have to ask yourself and realize I'm not, I'm not the leader that I want to be. I'm not the husband that I want to be. And so you have to be intentional and fix that. One of the key things for me that kind of kickstarted me was 75 Hard. I started doing 75 Hard and following Andy Frisella. And that whole just getting me in the mindset of I'm going to be intentional with my time, intentional with my life. I'm going to create better habits and just be disciplined, to do the things I know that I need to do. Right. And we all know the things that we need to do. Everybody listening, there's things I'm sure both you and I have that maybe we're not doing right now, but we need to be,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's a never ending thing, but yeah. So, okay. So you did that. So you have the spreadsheets going, and now your new kind of journey. So you're still doing the hardscape business, but now you've taken all those spreadsheets and you've seen a gap in the industry or an opportunity to help a lot of people. And you've turned that into a software, correct?
Yeah. So I tell this story all the time. In 2016, I was making money, right? Like I told you, I grew up really broke. You wouldn't know that, but my parents never had money, never. So I grew up with a broke mentality. We just talked about mindset. So in 2016, I was making more money than I ever even thought possible. But obviously I could make more. Okay. So what happened was we sold this. Remember I told you about that there's an unequal relationship between labor and materials, and there was that issue. We knew that was an issue in the company, but we weren't worried about it because I was really good at sales. And so I could always sell, pretty wide range projects. So if we lost money on something smaller, like an irrigation system, it didn't matter because we made it up in boulders because every project had boulders and we made tons of money on boulders. Well, in 2016, we sold a job. It was $200,000. 1,000 of it was a water feature. And I marked the water feature up because that's what they wanted, right? They wanted a water feature. It's why they called us. We were awesome at building water features. So I put a lot more, markup, I guess, in that water feature. And we sold the project. Well, as we started getting closer to the project, she started asking a lot of questions about, what's the finish going to look like around the edges? And how are we going to be able to get into this water feature? We really want to be able to swim in it. And the more questions she asked, the more I realized that we're building her more of a natural waterfall that, yes, you could get into. This woman needs a pool. And if I don't tell her that and we build what I've bid, I'm going to get to the end of this job. She's not going to be real happy with me. And I don't like unhappy customers. So I had to go to her and say, hey, I don't think you need a water feature. I think you need a pool. Well, that kind of, irritated her because, now she's looking at 80 to 90,000 for a pool, whereas we were at 50,000 for a water feature. But I told her, this is what you need. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll back the water feature out. And at this point, I just wanted to save face. I still wanted to get out of this project with a good rapport, and a good recommendation. And so I said, I will manage the pool. You can pay them directly. I won't make a dime off of it. So we lost the most profitable part of the project. And I basically did $1,000 worth of landscaping for who knows at that time. It was probably, I probably broke even, literally. Okay. And I just decided right when that job was done, there was one day I was sitting in my office and I was like, this is absolutely stupid. And I decided that day that I was never going to penalize a client for wanting a water feature. And I was never going to penalize myself if they didn't. I wanted to find a way to make the same amount of money per day on everything. The only way in my mind to do that was to get rid of materials. I took materials out of the equation. Okay. So I'll tell you real quick what I did. I sat down and I figured out, okay, what's my overhead? So I figured out what my exact overhead was for every month. And then I knew that I had overhead for 12 months out of the year, right? But I only worked for 9. So I had to take 12 months of overhead, divide that by 9. So I made sure that I made enough money to make it through the winter. Then I sat back and I was like, okay, well, how much am I making right now? Right. So I put that number in there. Like, what am I taking home every year? I put that number in there. And then I just divided that by however many basically work days we had in a year, working year. And then I had 3 crews. And so I divided that number by 3. And it basically gave me what we now call my PMM, which is my production minus materials. It gave me a number that I had to shoot for every day on every section of a project. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So were you essentially you were kind of estimating, you were pricing by, like, say it was a half day job, you're going to charge them that half day rate for your labor plus whatever the materials and equipment is, and just doing it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting. The minute I started to do that, I don't know, I really can't tell you what happened, but it changed the way I thought about every job and how I bid. And instead of worrying, and you used to be a contractor, so you could probably identify with this. Instead of worrying what my total sales were for the year, all I was worried about is making my production every day. Does that make sense? There's a book.
Yeah, because I was stuck in the sales every year. I was chasing that top line number. That's all.
And that's a big number.
Yeah.
And the problem with focusing, let's talk about this. The problem with focusing on that big number is you just want to get that number over with, right? So that might make you bid hastily because you just got to sell if you can sell another $100,000 and you got, 1.5 million to sell. Okay, I only got 1.4 million, right? And you just keep willing it down. For me, I didn't even focus on the big number. I just focused on my daily production. And it would be the difference of trying to eat a pizza in one bite or just eating a pizza one bite at a time, right? Yep. And so all I was doing is figuring out, all right, I just need to know what my production is every day per crew. And my income based off that model tripled over the next 4 years.
Crazy. So were you guys, when you were doing big projects, were you giving them, how are you bidding? Say I'm the client. Are you giving me a number? And now you knew your production enough where you knew you were going to pretty much hit those billable hours? Or were you, I know some other guys who they'll give a rough project estimate, but then they actually bill the client hourly, essentially.
Yeah, no, I don't play that game because I think not very many people that are savvy would actually sign a contract with somebody like that unless they were, even if they got a good relationship. That's a great way to ruin a relationship, in my opinion. All right, that's just me. So for me, I'm all about giving the client a hard proposal. Back in what I call my dumb days, I did a few things right. One of the things I did is I was doing a project. I mean, this was back when I was in the field. Okay. I mean, this could have been like 2004. This happened, but we had this project we were doing for a single older lady, and she had a double wide manufactured home, but she had this huge backyard, and we were literally bringing in 200 yards of soil. And it was just me and another guy. So I was bringing it back with a skid steer, and he had a rake, and he was, raking it out and telling me where the low spots were. And so it was just the two of us. And you got nothing to do when you're in the skid steer but think, right? And so I started thinking like, how long does it take us to spread a yard of soil? So I got my tape measure out and I figured out, how many buckets does it take to move a yard of soil? All right. So at that time with the skid steer I had, I was like 3, right? Okay. So then I just started timing, like, how long does it take to do 3 trips and to dump the soil, back drag it. And then when I leave, he's, bringing it to a rough grade. And I figured out that it was like 8 minutes for 2 guys to spread a yard of soil. Right. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. That helps a lot with my production, right? So now I can bid accurately. So then I started doing it with everything. I started figuring out, well, how long does it take to set gravel for a paver patio, right? When you're compacting, so I just started figuring all these numbers out. And so I know my production times really, really well. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses in this industry is people just don't know their production times. And I was just talking to a guy today. He signed up for a software, and I was like, the best, and he was an owner operator. I said, the best thing you can do for yourself is to start timing. Literally, you take your phone out and you're going to start setting gravel, hit start, and then hit stop when you're done. And now you can figure out your production times. Once you can figure that out, you'll be deadly. And so we started figuring our production times out for everything that we did, right? And when I started getting this system in place, and so the client, for all they would see is just one number, right? Like your beds with your bark, it's this much money.
Mm-hmm.
But on the back end, my software, my spreadsheets were saying, okay, here's the cost of materials, here's the labor. How much do I have to mark both of those up so that if I do, it's a long calculation, but if I were to take out materials, what would be my production per day? And I could show you in my software now, but even on my spreadsheets, the markup for each section was completely different to try to make it so that I made the same production every day.
Okay. Got it.
It's hard to understand that without seeing it, but that's the system.
At the end of the day, the important thing was that you hit your production, your billable hours every single day.
Yeah. And so think about this, okay? Think about this. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but this is like a conundrum in our business. When you do landscape construction, you deal in the thousands and 10,000s every day, right? $10,000, $1,000. And that can really skew your brain for thinking about $50 here and there. Does that make sense? Because on a given day, we can lose $1,000 and the next day we'll gain 3, and then the next day we'll lose 5, on a job. And it just kind of waxes and wanes. And so your brain gets used to dealing in 5s and 10s of thousands of dollars. So the reason why I bring that up is when you're looking at your bids from a production standpoint, right? Once you figure out your PMM, your production minus materials, think about this. We had 3 crews. I started thinking in my brain like, okay, what happens if I raise my production $50 a day? That's it. $50 a day. That seems like nothing. Don't you agree? Like $50 a day when you're doing a $100,000 job. But check this out. $50 a day times 3 crews is $150. Okay. A day. Still doesn't seem like a lot, but $150, I don't know what an actual number is, $150 a day times 22 work days in a month is $3,300. Okay. Well, if you only work 9 months out of the year, $3,300 times 9 is $29,700 additional that you could put in your pocket by not buying new equipment and not expanding your crews. And it's literally marking a job up $50 a day if you can stay on track. And so that's why I'm telling you my income increased 3 times over the next 4 years, because I just kept raising my prices, my production. I never raised prices on materials, right? Materials are what they are. Who cares? And I just kept saying, well, what if I charge an extra $50 a day? Holy crap, I sold that job. What if I mark the next job up another $50 a day? Holy crap, I sold that job.
Right.
So I just kept raising my production amount until people were like, it's too much money. We don't want to hire you. And once that happened about 4 times in a row, I was like, oh, well, you know what? We might've found our threshold. So I backed it off a little bit and back to selling. And then the next year, I have COVID to thank for a lot of it, because we all boomed in COVID, but I really took advantage of it. And I just started we were marking it was our production.
Yeah.
And that's all I had to concentrate on.
And the key to that is knowing what your break-even number, because you tracked your times. So you knew when you went into a project, it's going to take us 100 hours, period. So I know what I need to charge minimum to make to hit my numbers. And then you can start playing with it after that.
Yeah, that's it.
And it goes the other way. The same math applies with guys, wasting time going to the store, or hanging out in the shop for 15 minutes every day. It's like, how much time do, your guys waste every single day just twiddling their fingers because they're waiting on you. They don't know what to do. You don't have the system, or they're just hanging out. It's like, it's not about cracking the whip and having them be productive, but the same thing applies. It's like being aware at how much waste there can be. Maybe you don't get the materials delivered on time because you forgot to call them a day early or whatever. All those things matter. And we don't think it's a big deal. It's only 15 minutes. It's like, it's just one day, but it adds up over the course of a year to be tens of thousands of dollars that could have been in your pocket or is now out of your pocket and gone. And that's why the P&L, that's why there's no money in the bank when the P&L says there should be.
Well, you remember in the webinar when I showed guys, we have something called a Profit Genie that basically figures your PMM out for you, right? And so I was showing this to a guy one time, and I was showing him like, hey man, if you have 6 employees in your business, you could make $100,000 and all you have to do is charge $74 an hour. And he was like, well, that system doesn't work because I'm charging $74 an hour. I don't have $100,000 in my account. And I was like, well, the system works. So let's figure out what's going on. And we found out that he was taking 2 hours a day to go to lunch and pick up materials with his guys. Right. And so we created what we call the unbilled labor calculator, right? So we put in 2 hours. Now for him to make $100,000, he had to charge $95 an hour. So he had to charge $21 an hour more to make the same amount of money a year. What was mind blowing, even for me, and I built the tool, is that he had to charge with two unbilled labor hours. He would have to charge $84 an hour to break even. So without the 2 unbilled labor every day, he was making $100,000 charging $75 an hour. With the 2 hours of unbilled, he was having to charge $10 an hour more just to break even.
Yeah.
And that to me is mind blowing. And I really believe, from all the contractors I've talked to, I really believe that probably 90% of everybody's profits, that's where they're losing it, is in the unbilled labor. And I just don't think there's a tool out there. I'm tooting my own horn. I don't think there's a tool out there as comprehensive of what we built to really show you firsthand what it's costing you to have this unbilled labor.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It's all those little things that just add up. And it just, it's mind blowing. When I first did my own budget and realized what I should have been charging versus what I was actually charging. Yeah. It was like a $25 an hour difference,
Yeah.
It's like, wow, how did I even function not doing that? It's like, well, I didn't really. And I had a glorified, I would have made more money if I was working for somebody else,
Totally. I tell
way
guys,
less headaches.
100%. I tell guys when I coach them, if you're not making a minimum of $80,000 in your landscaping business, you should shut it down and go work for Starbucks. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but there's too much risk. There's too much stress involved that, 80,000 is really nothing, but that would be the bare minimum.
And that should be $80,000 above and beyond your pay.
Right.
Correct.
Well, but that just blows them away, because they're just like, I can't, they can't even
everybody's like, oh, I paid myself 80,000 and like, I'm doing good. Like, well, yeah, that's fine, but really you should have that in your bank account at the end of the year after you, like, that's what a for-profit company should have in their account.
Exactly.
So you as the owner, what you pay yourself, one, you should be paying yourself an owner wage. Think about if you have to replace yourself tomorrow, what are you going to have to go pay that person to replace you? You need to pay that to yourself, which means you need to charge for that in your estimates, and factor that into your overhead. And then above and beyond that, like so many guys on Facebook are like, I made $100,000 last year in profit. And then you ask them, okay, well, what did you pay yourself? And then they're like, $100,000. That was my profit. No, it's not. That means you made zero profit.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's for what we go through as owners, being an owner, especially in this industry, it's just hard. It's just a tough industry. I've got a contractor friend. He does remodels and home additions and stuff like that. Like, he does $50,000+ project, but he shows up with like a truck full of tools and that's it. He's got like $10,000 worth of tools in his half-ton pickup truck. And here we are, doing a $50,000 backyard with our 1-ton pickup truck and trailer and $100,000 of equipment in the back, and God forbid we charge more than like, $65 an hour because we're just a bunch of landscapers.
Right.
And that's just, those are just, that's the mindset that people have, but they won't bat an eye when a plumber shows up with the plunger for 5 minutes and charges them $180.
Right.
But
come on, man.
It's a tough industry.
A lot of that has to do with sales. I'm going to tell you what that has to do with sales, skills, confidence, and knowing who your ideal client is. Once I figured those out, when I tell guys what I charge per hour, they think I'm lying. They're like, well, that's. And remember, I came from nothing.
There's no way you're charging $180 an hour.
Right.
Hell, that's the $3 million I sold last year.
Right. I think I'm at a 170 an hour per guy. And I tell guys that, like, my company, we have 3 2-man crews. We do 2.8 million a year in sales. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's great. It's possible, but it just takes intentionality and tweaking the little things and caring about the little things. Right.
Yeah. But I got to brag. One of the cool things about the software that I built, it's got something called ISPS baked into the software, which is integrated sales, psychology, and strategies. And so what
Right.
we've done is especially in the proposal part of the software, we have given the ability to make packages to present to the client. And like, it takes you about 2 minutes to build these packages, right? And so you can give them good, better, best, and shoot for the moon. And that is a sales strategy. And there's so many psychological reasons why that's a more effective way of selling. But that's one of the ways that I can sell $200,000-$300,000 jobs. I can give them packages for 150 all the way up to 300,000, you know? So one of the things that we wanted to do when we created this software, because I know from all the guys I've talked to, most of these guys, they get into the landscaping business because they want to build. They don't want to have to learn sales. Now, they need to learn some sales, but I've baked a lot of psychology and strategies that I've learned over the years into the software. So if you just use the software, you're going to be a better salesperson than most everybody else out in the industry. So that's kind of cool. I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah. I like that piece when you showed it. I think because we all, everyone knows, like, give them options, like, right, give them that good, better, best. And with most softwares, you kind of have to like create that separately and send different proposals for each one, right? But with your guys's, you can do it all right. You can do it all right there, and then build them the way you want it to. Which is pretty cool. So the software is Elevation Advisor. That's the name of it. We'll definitely put a link in the show notes if anybody ever wants to check it out. Where can they go to find more
www.elevationadvisor.com, and it's actually advisor, OR, not ER. That's Advisor. It. Elevationadvisor.com. There's a little button up down at the top that says sign up, and you sign up, and there's some videos, and it's pretty great software, man. I love it. You know, what's funny is I've been using these stupid spreadsheets for all these years, and I've outgrown them. And so I'm having to manipulate them all the time. And we finally got the software done. It's blowing my mind how much easier it is to run. You know, the software basically runs your company from proposal all the way to invoicing, and it does your calendar, your project budget. So yeah, they can go to the website. It'll tell them everything it does.
Great. That's great. I think it's awesome that, there's a couple softwares now that have been built out from the field, right? And I just think there's so much more value to those when, like, yours has been in the mix for 10 plus years, tweaking, testing, again, testing. And so, people listening to this know it's gonna work, because it's not, you're not some web dev or software engineer that decided I'm gonna build something for the landscape industry. It's like, no, you built this for yourself. You tested it out. You're your own proof that the software works. And you're still operating the business that, is running off of this software. And now you're sharing it to the world.
I talked to a guy today that's using one of my competitors' software, and he switched about a month ago to ours. And I said, can you just tell me what you like about it? And he goes, Kelly, let me just put it to you this way. What did he say? I wrote it down. It's awesome. He said, it does what it's supposed to, and all the pieces flow because it's intuitive. It's not complex. It's easy on the eyes. And I don't know. I like what he said about that, because that's exactly how we made it.
And it's who's the ideal person that it's for?
It is built for landscape construction companies.
Okay. No maintenance.
I've got a couple of guys that they're using it for maintenance, but it is not built for that. It is built for construction, but you can use it for maintenance, but we don't have a reoccurring calendar. When I talk to guys, I tell them pick one or the other, either mow lawns or landscape. And I had to take my own advice. When I built out the software, the landscape maintenance business is such a completely different business. It would literally take a completely different software angle, right? To build it. I got a lot of friends that are in the maintenance, and they all consistently charge different rates for mowing than they do for spraying, than they do for fertilizing, than they do for clipping and stuff like that. Now, I'm not in the maintenance business. I would say that's ridiculous. Just pick a flat rate, but I get what they're saying, because they make a ton of money on the spraying. Trying to build one software platform that serves both of those functions would have taken me easily 4 to 5 years to build. And so we just decided to stick with what I know, what my system works with, and it's landscape construction. And most of the guys that are in landscape construction that mow consistently tell me, we don't want to mow. We just do it because we feel like we have to. So it's built for construction.
Cool. Cool. Awesome. Well, Kelly, it's been great. I really appreciate you hopping on here. And I'm excited to watch you and the software grow and to see how many people it's going to help. I think it's a huge need for guys to know their numbers and to have a system that just works, and it's pretty cool that you have that. What did you call that sales piece integrated in there? The integrated.
So it's ISPS, Integrated Sales
ISPS.
Psychology and Strategies.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes piece. That's awesome.
Came up with that on myself. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Cool. So reach out, go to Elevation Advisor. You can schedule a demo.
Yep.
And reach out to Kelly. I really appreciate it, dude.
Yeah. It was nice to be on here, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.